Go for you.
Okay.
I got it.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, 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 everybody. If you wouldn't mind just muting your microphone unless you're a panelist for a little while. We're going to do some breakout groups later. But let me introduce myself. My name is Sidney Turner, and I'm part of the planning committee for SRQ Strong. And for those of you that are new to SRQ Strong, we're really a grassroots organization that focuses on trauma. And we do once a month presentations on trauma on different topics. We also do trainings out in the community, and we do community outreach. We have a lot of projects going on, so please reach out to us if you're interested in getting more involved. We'd love to have your help and support. And since this is grassroots driven, it's really helpful if you have ideas for topics that we should cover or important things to discuss, please let us know, because that's exactly how we got the idea for the presentation today. So our presentation today is Put Your Mask On First, a school personnel wellness project. And so this actually came out of discussions that we had based off the trauma that our educators and our school personnel are going through. And I'm sure most of us, back when we used to fly on airplanes, remember the flight attendants always telling us, make sure if you have a child with you to put your own mask on first before you put it on your child, for obvious reasons, right? Because if you're incapacitated or not able to breathe, how are you then going to help your child? But it's interesting for our educators and our school personnel, oftentimes the focus is first on the kids and then on themselves second. So that's kind of the whole goal behind the presentation today, is to talk about that, how educators also need to focus on taking care of themselves and putting on their own mask first. So a quote to just get us started today is, an empty lantern provides no light. Self-care is the fuel that allows your light to shine brightly. And that's what our educators are. They're really lanterns for our children and our youth and our community. And so it's really important that they have light in their lanterns, and we don't want them to get burnt out. So that's what we're talking about today. So compassion fatigue, that's like the buzzword when we're talking about the trauma that our educators and school personnel face, among many others, our first responders and many other helping professionals. But what is compassion fatigue? It really breaks out into two categories. The first one is burnout. And I'm sure many of us know someone in our office or at some point in our careers where you've had someone in your office that's really cynical, kind of bitter, glass half full, and oftentimes they get categorized as the difficult one in the office. And that's because most people don't understand that that's actually a sign of burnout. So things that you see with burnout are things like exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced job performance. So ultimately it impacts your ability to do your job. The second type, the second category under compassion fatigue is called secondary traumatic stress. And in essence, that's PTSD. So many of our educators and school personnel actually experience common PTSD symptoms, like what most people think of when veterans come back from war. Things like avoidance, sleep disturbances, intense thoughts, flashbacks, those types of things. So when people go to a counselor and ask for help with these types of things, usually when people are burnt out,
I can pick it up if you need me to pick it up.
even if you switch to a new career.
There you are, good.
So what some of the indicators of burnout are that chronic fatigue, like we talked about, difficulty focusing, feeling hopeless, that cynical, kind of that glass half empty kind of person in the office, increased illness. So many of these people actually tend to miss more days of work, isolation, and then the physical health symptoms. Most people don't know about this, that burnout can actually lead to all kinds of physical health problems like heart disease, stroke, sudden cardiac death, type 2 diabetes, and even infertility. So burnout isn't something that just happens with your mental health. It can have a great impact on your physical health as well. And then for secondary traumatic stress, that's that PTSD side of things. You see those typical PTSD symptoms: fear, difficulty sleeping, flashbacks, avoiding events, people. easily startled, the anxiety, and many memory difficulties. A lot of people describe kind of like a brain fog and not being able to think clearly. So you might be wondering, okay, that's great, but how common is compassion fatigue anyways? Well, this is a study that was done in 2012 by the University of Montana, and they found that 75% of the people that they polled in schools had that secondary traumatic stress or that PTSD, 75%, so it's incredibly common. But you might be thinking, well, that's Montana. That's not what's going on here in Sarasota and Manatee County. Well, we actually have local data that we've recently collected from July to September. And we found that our educators locally, 57% of them roughly are experiencing burnout, and 74% are experiencing those PTSD-like symptoms. So it's actually incredibly common. And these were collected before the school year had started. I would expect if we collected it now, we might see higher rates of this. And then we also wanted to see how is COVID impacting these things. And we found that this was again before the school year started, but even before the school year started, we found that about 68% of educators said their job was harder because of COVID. And 61% of them said their personal life had gotten harder as a result of COVID. So we're going to go ahead and do a poll now to see, for all of you guys here with us today, how often have you guys ever experienced compassion fatigue in your workplace? Okay, it looks like about 80% of you have experienced significant compassion fatigue in your career. So obviously, sounds like many of you here can relate to some of the things we're going to talk about today. So, I don't know how to get rid of this poll. Are you guys seeing the poll on the screen? No? Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel that's going to be talking with us today. We're really fortunate to have a wonderful panel of people from diverse experiences in school systems. So first, we have Amy Weinberger. She's a 30-plus year veteran and trauma-informed educator in public, private, charter, and entrepreneurial education. She co-founded the Lean On Me project with one of her former students, Jordan Stonecipher. And really the purpose of Lean On Me is to bridge education and mental health, wellness, and K-12 communities for teachers, administrators, and school personnel, as well as students. In addition, she's been tapped by the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee to provide training to adults who serve students via mental health first aid. She holds a bachelor degree from Emory University and a master's degree from Wilkes University. The second panelist that we have is Maria Clapp. She's a licensed mental health counselor and a certified addiction counselor. She's the director of the high school counseling services at Sarasota Military Academy. She was born in Spain and moved to Sarasota, and one of Maria's goals is to ensure that youth and families have access to needed services. And then the last panelist that we have is Sarah, I'm going to screw up your name, Knaus.
Knaus, you got it.
Knaus, thank you. And she's an administrator at Tatum Ridge Elementary School. She's worked with Sarasota County Schools for 17 years, serving as a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, intervention teacher, and a behavioral specialist. So welcome to all of our panelists here, and we're going to discuss a little bit more about compassion fatigue. So I'll start off with you, Sarah. How do we build more awareness about compassion fatigue in our schools?
Yeah, so this one, I really just think it's about starting a conversation and building awareness. When I started teaching, 17 years ago, I guess, it was frowned upon if you talked about having issues in the classroom with students because it appeared that you did not have classroom management, and we viewed behavior as more of, as a purposeful discipline instead of it being a reaction to possible trauma. So really, I just think it's more about ending the stigma and discussing it as a way that we can build conversation around it and build collaboration, because I don't know about the rest of the teachers in there, but I know personally I have experienced compassion fatigue at times. You know, and I was one of the lucky ones that can get over that hump, but it's hard. And just knowing that other people are in the same boat, I think it's going to be the best way to build this awareness.
Yeah. So awareness and decreasing the stigma.
And just get rid of the stigma, and just, you know, having some school leaders being open with the conversation and allowing others to feel safe to join in on that conversation. Hey, I'm seeing the same struggles. What has worked before?
Yeah, absolutely. How do we decrease that stigma? Is it more just talking about it more openly?
Well, I think so. And I think that the start is already happening now that are trying to break the stigma with mental health. You know, a lot of the kids that we're seeing in school, they have very different needs, and the teachers aren't receiving much training on it. They've learned, okay, this is what trauma is, and this is what it could look like in children, but they're not learning, okay, what next? So, you know, we're all working on it. But I think it's the more conversation around it, the better. And getting the people that are in the trenches, you know, just on board with, hey, it's okay to be tired. It's okay to feel like you're not meeting every child's needs, you know, right now. There's support for you. I think that many classroom teachers just feel alone, and they're isolated in their own little four walls. And, you know, I just think that having those supports in place, and like SRQ Strong is doing, and the Lean On Me project, is just getting names out of support, and encouraging people to use those supports without embarrassment.
Yeah, absolutely. Trainings and getting more community supports, awareness about those community supports. Maria, what do you think? Oh, sorry, you're muted, Maria.
Good evening. So my first thought would be to identify and become more, recognize how we're feeling and how we're thinking about what's going on, and being able to express all these feelings and emotions and beliefs that we're having at this time, but also creating a specific time and place that we can share, we can discuss without feeling that we're being judged, or that somebody's gonna think that we're not doing our job, or we're weak, or we're failing. So that space and time, and being very intentional about having that space and time, and not just one time in a training every 3 months, but being mindful about when and how create that space for educators, and provide platforms like this one tonight to have an opportunity to express ourselves. Hearing from each other and listening to what one another have to say and how they're doing, and what's working for them and what is not working for them. What works for one person doesn't work for another one. So I think the fact that sharing in a platform where everything goes is very powerful for all of us. And I'm thankful that we have this platform tonight to start the dialogue, and hopefully we don't stop here. This is just the beginning for it.
That's our hope too. We hope this is just the beginning of the dialogue, and we can then kind of decipher what options we have moving forward. What about you, Amy?
Yes, so first of all, thank you SRQ Strong for hosting this. We are so honored to be here. And thank you ladies and all the participants tonight. So the cost of caring is expensive. It's expensive financially, and tonight we're talking that it is expensive emotionally. It takes a toll on each of us, but we rarely, like Sarah and Maria just stated, we rarely have had spaces for this type of conversation to even exist. So a way we can build more awareness about compassion fatigue in school environments is by noticing how we actually frame questions to each other, how we engage with each other. Not like, oh, so how are you? Not, you know, the Bob thing, but hey, how are you? And pausing and taking that moment. Now, as teachers, we rarely have a chance to actually sit on a toilet on any given day and even take a breath, much less pee. So asking each of us to actually reimagine how we speak and listen to each other is kind of revolutionary. but it's possible because we are all exhausted, not just with our current collective trauma, but of all the unresolved baggage that we tend to schlep around with us during a day. Look, we are all educators and we pick up broken pieces in a cumulative way. At some point, we have to unload those pieces. We have to just pause in intentional ways. We feel the feelings of our students very deeply. We dream about them being successful. We experience what they fear. And the accumulation of those emotions leads to our own spark fizzling out. That is why we need to recognize and begin to flip the spark back on and rekindle ourselves. And that's what this moment is about.
Do you have any ideas, Amy, on how we can rekindle that spark?
I do. Thank you for asking. Yes. So one way we can do that is actually the Lean on Me project is doing it, and Tatum Ridge, Sarah's school, got to experience the spark. What we did, my daughter is a performer up in New York, and she's always having headshots. Headshots, like, you know, pictures. And that's what actresses and actors do, but I'm not that person. I'm not a performer. And she said to me, why don't you start finding out if teachers would like to have professional headshots, not picture day, not that, but headshots. So I asked Sarah and she said yes. And we had 12 people originally sign up. By the end of our 2-hour time slot, we had 38 people walk out of the school and come in for headshots. Now, the people who came were custodials, were teachers, were school counselors, were administrators. It was anyone who touches a child, right? And in these really positive ways. But this is how they came to the headshots. They came kind of saddened. Their heads were low. They were nervous. Oh, does my hair look fine? I didn't put any makeup on. I didn't this, I didn't that. And I just said to many of them, because we were so excited to see them all, it's okay. Kids want you to be authentic. They're not looking for your makeup or your nail polish or your high heels, maybe your big earrings, right? But they're looking for your authentication. And that's what we captured. And when they would leave from the headshot, we got this. Oh, that was wonderful. I even told some of the women that came through, you are beautiful. And they looked at me and they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. Now, the beauty, you know, some of them are larger than others. You know, we have different body types and our hairs look different and all this sort of stuff. But some of them were so surprised that someone said that you look beautiful. And they do. Mm-hmm. And just that moment of intention was enough because they walked out. So now we are offering headshots to all the county schools and anyone, actually, any of the county schools. And we come to your school, you give us our window of time, and we show up with our photographer. And we take headshots, and within 2 days you have these beautiful headshots so you can use on social media, since that's where we are. And now you have this continuity, right, of your professionalism. So raising the professionalism of who we are is one way that we are reducing compassion fatigue, because you have to feel good about yourself. There are 4 more, but I'll stop there.
And we'll be doing breakouts later to ask you guys what you think are some things we can do to help rejuvenate spark for all of our school personnel. So this is an interesting one. We're all living in the middle of a pandemic right now. I don't know anyone that hasn't been impacted by it in the entire world, but specifically with COVID-19 in our schools, how has COVID-19 impacted compassion fatigue and what we're seeing right now in our schools locally? Sarah?
So many, I think that most of you are Sarasota County, but if you are anywhere in the state, you have read that the concurrent teaching is really just very, very difficult, and it's just draining our teachers left and right. Concurrent teaching is where you have students in the classroom, and then you also have students at home. So the teacher is managing Zoom and a camera to make sure that all the students can see what's happening in the classroom, and they're still held to the same standard as the kids that are in the classroom, even though they're taking place at home. So the teacher has to juggle between the students that are there and then the students that are online, making sure that they're also doing their work and what have you. And, you know, I get daily, probably at this point, hourly emails, and it's not the teachers complaining. I got an email today saying, "Hi, I know you all are working very hard, but I deliberately counted the extra hours that I'm spending on just the concurrent teaching, and it was 14 hours. And that was over the weekend, running copies and getting things ready." So that, I think, is the biggest impact, but I know that if we had current data, that it's affecting everybody right now, even the teachers, because we do have some teachers that are not concurrent. We have some teachers where all of their students are in the classroom. So now you have a division as well of the teachers that are in the classroom that have all students there, and then the teachers who are struggling and working all these extra hours doing the concurrent teaching. So, you know, it's the people who are struggling now that have students, they can't even talk about burnout or compassion fatigue because they've got these people on the other end who are struggling, you know, with a whole different area. But we know that trauma isn't so much about the event itself, it's the response to an event that's affecting one's ability to cope, and that coping mechanism is jeopardized. So whether or not they're teaching concurrently or brick and mortar, you know, many of our kids came back phenomenal, you know, but there are the few that have come back or they haven't come back, and it's hard. They're not in front of us, so the teachers don't have that control. We don't see the kids, so we don't know if they're hungry. We don't see a parent around and the students off task. Are they being supervised by an adult? Teachers in nature, you know, they're strong working. They hold all their kids to high standards. They're relationship builders. And you take a camera and you're trying to build a relationship with 10 kids on a camera and 8 kids in your classroom, you know, they're just struggling meeting the needs. And when teachers feel like they can't do their best, oh my gosh, you know, even though they're working twice as hard, they feel like they're getting, you know, a quarter accomplished of what they previously were doing. And again, it's not that it's the complaint, it's just, wow, it is really, really hard. And actually, I'm lying. It is a complaint, you know, and I don't blame them. It's hard. You know, so whether or not you're teaching concurrently or you're teaching with all your students in the classroom, kids came back with a lot of different issues before COVID. And if you want to see something sad, go to a kindergarten playground at recess time, you know, because they all have their mask on, they have to be 6 feet apart. And up until, I think, a week and a half ago, they couldn't even use the school equipment. So literally, they just stand there and look around, take a little mask break, and there's no interaction. And, you know, that's how I feel that our teachers are feeling too. There's little to no interaction, and everybody's just stuck in their little caves, you know, afraid and feeling like they're not doing what they would want to do, and that's meet all of our students.
Well, we know that loss of connection is a huge protective factor against getting compassion fatigue. So also, you know, not having that same connection is having.
Yes.
Sidney, we're losing you.
Maria, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. So one of the things that I'm noticing is the feeling, the atmosphere that a lot of educators are feeling unprepared, not knowing what's next, not knowing what's going to happen, living day by day, hour by hour, period by period. So that's some of the feelings that I'm getting. Just trying to get used to this new reality, not knowing when this is going to end and how it's going to end. And I think in turn, some of the students are feeling what the educators are feeling right now, that sense of uncertainty sense of that they're not doing enough. That is never enough, no matter how much time they're being put in, or no matter how much effort they put in, no matter what they're doing or not doing, is the feeling that it's not enough. They're not reaching out to some of those students who might need more help. And in turn, that go back and forth between students and educators, having those feelings being back and forth. So it's really hard to deal with that situation on a daily basis. And not having any control over it, not having a say, or how are we gonna take care of this, or who's gonna take care of this, when this is gonna end. We're just going day by day. And I think a lot of educators like to have that sense of control, having their lesson plans, having their plan period, having everything planned. So not having that is a huge issue for a lot of us at this point. And we pass that on to some of our students who have their own issues as well. So it's a back and forth, emotional kind of game back and forth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Maria. When our teachers are feeling compassion fatigue, that then translates to our students. Yeah, it does. Amy, what do you think about this?
So I'm not actually in the school directly anymore. I actually see students online all day long, starting at 7:30 in the morning and going to 7 at night, you know, at least 4 days a week. And they tell me lots of information, of course, right? So I'll get to that after the third question, but I just wanted to state, you know, where I am in the, you know, in the environment, you know, because where Maria and Sarah are. So we are living in this time where feeling depleted seems to be the theme. So, and that can lead to something that we haven't talked about, which is called indifference. And indifference is where hope and helplessness are full of emotion, and indifference lacks the emotion. I'll say that again. So indifference is where hope and helplessness are full of emotion, like hope, that's emotional, right? Feeling hopeless or feeling hope, either way. But indifference will be the lack of that. Indifference will be the lack of that. Hold on. I'm not at my home. Okay. And that's the danger. That's what I stay up at night about. How do we find hope in that school day, like you were just talking about, Maria? So we start by recognizing our own indicators of compassion fatigue. Oh, I'm really feeling nervous about this. And we actually say it out loud. We actually share that with someone who is a trusted colleague, right? We have to decide that we can reach out. And we are such givers that we forget to decide to ask for help. I've been in caregiving situations for 5 years when I had to take care of my mom, and I did not breathe for 5 years until the moment she took her last breath, and then I finally breathed. So I can only imagine every day we're not breathing at all. We have to begin to reimagine ourselves, how we can be a trusted colleague. How I can approach you, for example, Caroline, right? Or Ginger or Lisa, how I can approach you and say, you know what, I'm not feeling so well. For you to at least say to me, oh my goodness, what's going on? How can I be helpful? You may not solve my problem, nor do you even have to, but I'm going to trust you that you can hear me. And that's almost enough sometimes. So being present and staying present are these skills that we have to practice that we haven't, but we always ask our kids, our students to be present, but we don't ask ourselves to be present. I think that's so interesting. So that's where we start. We put on our own mask. The big solution to all this is the new model of what our classrooms look like. We don't just have a teacher anymore. We should have a mental health coach right beside that teacher, and we should have a tech support. And Elise is on our line, our call tonight. She's our tech support. I'm not doing any tech support. I'm doing my teaching, right? And then I have my mental health coach, Sarah, and you know, Maria and Sidney, they're my health coaches right now. We had to prepare for this. We had to rely on each other. This is not how a classroom looks like. And I was a teacher in the classroom as well, from a public school to a private school to charter and to, you know, entrepreneurial work. We don't do these things. So I'd like everyone just to take a moment and go to a chat, pick someone out on the chat and just ask them how they're doing, because we have to practice. So I'm going to go pick Caroline. I saw you first. I'm going to, just so you know it's coming, I'm picking you. I'm just going to ask you. And when Caroline responds, which I hope you will, I don't have to solve her problem. She just, that's what I mean. It's not a big exercise, but let's just pick someone and say, how are you, in the chat, like intentionally. So here you come, Caroline. If I can find my chat box. Okay. Everyone do it.
I think what you're bringing up, Amy, is really important, and that's that support aspect again. And how do we create that culture of support? And you're right, it starts with each of us reaching out to our friends, to our colleagues, and being that support, asking them, how are you doing today?
That's right. And when Caroline sent me what she sent me, my response is really, thank you for sharing that. I can't help Caroline be less tired right this second in the moment, but I can be compassionate on her response. And I care deeply that you feel less tired in a second, right? I just know I can't change it. So we have to decide what we can and can't do and how we can be there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move to our last question, and then we'll break out into our breakout group. So how might awareness about compassion fatigue also promote awareness about the trauma that our students are facing right now?
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of the symptoms that the students are facing, the teachers are facing as well. And, hey guys. And, you know, when the symptoms are much the same, and then we can put a name to what the teachers are experiencing and why they're experiencing what they are, I think it's a little bit easier because it brings that normalcy back to it. And then that brings in the trauma-informed care of how we handle our students, because just how the way that the teachers need to be handled when they're experiencing trauma and they're in that crisis mode and everything seems too overwhelming to deal with, it's the same way that we need to be dealing with our students when they're in that same situation. You know, we, as a district, we focus on positive behavior support, and we paired along with University of South Florida for that. And then also working with restorative strategies and encouraging teachers to do daily circles and really bringing in that restorative piece so that we can understand the students and understand, hey buddy, remember? Okay, sorry, I just had an unexpected visitor show up to take my son for a ride. So fun times. But anyway, you know, it's the reason why we all are acting the way that we act when we experience trauma is it's our way of dealing with our trauma, and the students have the same issues, but the difference is we have tools in our toolbox, the kids don't. So when the teachers and the staff members start recognizing their own compassion fatigue and what their needs are and things that help them, it's not going to be, you know, the negative consequence all the time that's going to help them. It's going to be loving compassion. And once they start to feel that loving compassion and they can start working through the trauma and they can start, you know, dealing with with whatever is happening in a healthier state, they start to recognize how to deal with the kids. I think though that this has been a little bit backwards. We've learned about the trauma-informed care for our students, but we never learned the reciprocal. So we've always been working with our students on, you know, how to get over trauma and what it might look like, and how do we handle a kid that's shutting down? Well, we're going to handle a kid that's shutting down much differently than a kid that's, you know, acting out, but they may have the same underlying problem at home. It's just showing up in a different form. So I actually, for me, I think that the awareness that we brought to trauma-informed care for our students is actually going to help with the compassion fatigue. That's my goal anyway.
Well, and as an educator, if you know the tools you need to do to feel better yourself, you can then share those tools with your students.
Right.
Maria, as a mental health professional, what do you think?
I think that when the educators become more aware of some of the signs and the cues that you can look, because you can see them in yourself or others around you, it's much more easier identifying those when we see students in front of us. We can identify those signs and symptoms, but we can also help them educate to the student what's going on with them in a safe and in a more positive environment, because it's really frightening when students don't know what's going on. They're feeling something, they're thinking about things, but they don't know quite well where it's coming from. So it's reassuring for a lot of students where a teacher can explain, can show that they understand, they know what they're talking about, and they can provide a safe environment for them to start exploring with the student. It might not be able to resolve the issue, but might get them in touch with a counselor or with another provider where we can get some assistance from the students. The bottom line is when the students feel that they're understood, that they are given the time to express themselves or to be who they are, it's a win-win situation for both the student and the teacher, because that creates that connection with that student. And the students talk. And the students will say, well, I know that teacher. The teacher was there for me when I needed. So it is one of those things that it grows. You don't have to do anything about it. It grows by themselves. Just the simple matter of being there when a student needs you. That's all it is. Doesn't matter what you look like, how much you know, how much training you got, what your credentials are. Just being present with the student when they need you. That's all they need. And they're appreciative of that.
Yeah. And I was just thinking too, as you were talking, that if the students look at the educators and the school personnel and see them struggling, but having stigma and shame about that, what does that then tell them when they're struggling and hurting too, that they should hide it or be ashamed of it? So by addressing compassion fatigue, you're also showing and modeling to students that it's okay to struggle, or it's okay to have, you know, good moments and bad moments like we all do. And then to kind of help take that stigma and shame away. Amy, what do you think?
So I have a very interesting, you know, perspective in the sense that kids tell me all about their teachers all the time. They tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. Their perspective is real to them. And they're also very truthful, right? And they can tell me which teachers are caring, which ones are compassionate. They can tell me which ones are the strict ones or the disorganized ones. They tell me which teachers understand them and which ones push them away. They tell me which teachers are angry all the time and which ones are patient. They can read us. This can be a good thing or this can be a bad thing depending on how we are feeling, right? And we often talk about what goes into our mouths because we're also more conscious of food, but we rarely talk about what comes out of our mouths. We all have one mouth, but most of us have two ears. So listening more compassionately and intently really matters, like Maria said and Sarah said. Our own behaviors matter. Our check-ins with ourselves is what guides our moment of teaching, right? I remember my teachers from first grade to 12th grade. And, you know, I was in school in the 70s and early 80s. Wow, that's so funny to say, of the 1900s. And what they said to me and how they said it to me, it either built me up or it cut me down, right? Or chopped me down. And as Maya Angelou once said, and I love this quote from her because I have gained wisdom, as you grow older, you will discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself and one for helping others. We've always had our two hands, but never thought about my hands that way, right? So the time is now to help ourselves so we can better help our students.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, isn't that neat?
We need to plaster that all over the schools.
Right, we all have two hands, but we forget, like most of the answers to all these problems are kind of right in front of us. We don't need more money. We don't need, more time. It's here. We just have to take the breath. It's reaction versus response, right? And look, my ACEs score is very high. I did not have it so easy. And it doesn't matter. I'm not living my score. And that's what you were saying about modeling. And that's why SRQ Strong is so important to our community, because we don't have to be our score.
Yeah, I love that, Amy. So now we want to hear
teaching sorry, I'm jumping in totally out of turn, but it's all about the resiliency. And that's what sets, the successful trauma survivors from the ones who are still struggling. They have yet to learn to be resilient. And same thing with the kids, they do need to be taught those skills so that they can overcome as well. And, building those relationships and being able to be trusted is so important in that. So
important. So we want to hear from all of you guys now, because I'm sure you guys are all percolating on all these great ideas of things we can do. So we're going to break you into small groups and give you about 8 minutes to talk about what you think the community can do to support our schools in addressing compassion fatigue. So Annalise is thankfully breaking out into all these groups, and then we'll come back together after you're done and discuss what we can do as a community to help support.
Yeah, that's better. Can you repeat what you said?
Sure. If anyone wants to share what they talked about in their small groups, or if they had any questions for the panelists, if you want to raise your hand, or if you want to write it in the chat box. Amy, what did you guys talk about in your group?
Yeah, so I had the lovely moment to meet Catherine and to meet with Lauren. And Catherine is actually in clinical nursing and has now retired, if I have your story correct. I don't want to tell your story, but that's what you said. And up in Ohio, where she is 6 months a year, and then 6 months down here, she's up in Bradenton. The nursing world has not embraced this as much as we're trying to embrace in Sarasota. So she's really hoping to connect with this kind of community. So we're so happy to meet with her. And then Lauren has been out of education for a little bit, but she remembers what it feels like. And so she's trying to, I suggested going all the way back up to the top to the link that I provided. I'll put it back in on how to connect her educators with, what we can do to feel better.
That's great. In our group too, we talked about doing some kind of support groups where teachers and school personnel can come together and talk about these kind of things, maybe online or in person. But the one challenge we talked about is really the issue of time. Amy, you had mentioned, Sarah, you had mentioned it, that someone had worked 14 hours during the weekend just to prepare. So where is that time going to come in?
Well, that time is taken out of their time that they would be relaxing and practicing self-care.
Yeah.
And family time, and then that causes stress on the family, which causes, more issues for that person. So it's the cycle.
Lauren, you had something? Oh, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I also was thinking about that, just being a former educator, knowing that just time is so limited even now. We talked about that, all those extra hours, but, Resilient Retreat does the self-care kits. And I wonder if that's a way to show support. I feel this need to show more gratitude to, for the teachers, that are teaching my children, or those self-care kits that maybe we could give more to the teachers, or somehow, I guess, I just think that's a way, a tangible item that people can have to show that we support them, but it's not requiring the time.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. For those of you that don't know, Lauren and I are both involved in Resilient Retreat, and we help all kinds of helping professionals and first responders, including teachers and school personnel that are experiencing compassion fatigue. And we do all kinds of workshops and support groups on a very varying topics, from journaling to foam rolling, many different topics, and they're all free and confidential. So if you know of anyone that might be interested, please share. But you're right, Lauren, I think a huge barrier we're facing is just people having the time to do so. Our workshops are still, selling out or being fully booked, but it's still an issue of time, I think. But, not everyone's able to do those things.
So with that said, we have 4 initiatives going on through the Lean On Me project that we'd like to share with you.
Yeah, let me.
Yeah. So number 1, some of you were on the call a little bit earlier. We have a new initiative rolling out called Voices for Teachers, Projecting and Protecting Your Voice and Your Breath with a Mask. And that will be, unfortunately, online, but it's the best we have. And what we want to also be able to do is provide quality masks for teachers, because we're not exactly wearing the best mask. I don't know, some are, sucking in their mask. Some aren't getting enough air, like you have, like the old air mask, oxygen tank breather on. So this is a New York voice coach. She's young, she's spiffy, and she's a performer. And we have to start recognizing that we are performers. So how do we breathe through it? We talk from here up. This is a very emotional space. So if we can bring our breathing down to our diaphragm, which is actually under our ribs and not in another place, we can start calming ourselves, because we don't breathe well. And that gives us a lot of anxiety, or it can, if we weren't taught that. Number 2, I mentioned the Headshot Project for educators. Number 3, this was Sarah's idea, and it started over the summer. The Pay It Forward Lunch Project for school personnel. The Lean On Me project picks a school. We started with Sarah's school, and she passed it on to Booker Elementary, who passed it on. We were able to get to 10 schools so far, as you can see. And we deliver lunch for school personnel and custodials, because they don't get the thank yous. And when Sarah said, when we asked, Sidney and Maria and I asked, what can we do? She said, some thank yous. And you said that, Lauren. And then the 4th way to heal ourselves is through our community book circles that actually start on this Thursday, which we sent the link to, that you can participate. These are all sponsored by the Lean On Me project, as well as some with the Resilient Retreat, and NAMI will be in with us for the book circles.
Great. Thank you, Amy. So there's a lot of great initiatives going on, but if you have other ideas or ways that we can support our community and our school personnel, we'd love to hear those ideas. And I couldn't leave without giving a plug for SRQ Strong. As I mentioned, we do once a month these presentations. So next month, October 26th, 6 to 7:30, it's all about painting social justice. And Dr. Denise Davis Cotton is coming for a presentation talking all about African-American culture. So we welcome all of you guys to come again. You can register as well for this event. And thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciated all of your feedback and input. And if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to us or to SRQ Strong. Annalise, what's the email for SRQ Strong?
Yes, you can just email us at sarasotastrong@gmail.com.
So, Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. It was wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. It was great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.